welcome back. It is time for another video on Where the Crawdads Sing. Technically this week, based on my book club's reading schedule, we were supposed to hit chapter 21, but as discussed in my previous video for this book, I am not having an easy time getting into it, so I am still behind schedule. I've hit chapter 15, I want to say, so I have like 6 chapters to go to be on target, which maybe I can do today. A lot of them are fairly short chapters, and page-wise, I'm on like page 90, I think, and it's 142, so it's only about 50 pages to finish up, which isn't that much to read in a day, honestly, but with how my interest level has with this book, probably won't happen. I'm probably just going to be behind all month, which is super frustrating when I'm supposed to be doing discussion questions for it. But yeah, so moving on to that at least. The discussion questions that I posed to my book club, I just have 2, and they're not anything super exciting, but we can at least still talk about them a little bit. The first question I asked is what they thought of the dual timeline that's going on in this. We've got like 1950, just barely into 1960, and 1969, and we're just kind of slowly progressing through time that way. I think eventually the timelines are probably going to meet, since we have moved past like 1959 into 1960, and the other timeline is just 1969, so they're not that far apart. So that's kind of my big prediction with it, that it's gonna kind of culminate in coming into the one timeline. But honestly, I'm not really liking the dual timeline thing. I know it can work sometimes in some stories, but as the blurb on this book describes, it's part mystery and part coming-of-age story, and the coming-of-age story stuff so far has been all the earlier timeline with, I think her name is Kaya, and while some of the writing, especially around like describing the Martian stuff, is really pretty, the actual events that are happening, I'm just not even that interested in, which is kind of weird because she's basically been a baby at this point. But there you go. I don't know. I don't like it. It's not cutting it for me, so that one's not interesting. The later timeline is pretty interesting. We've got like a murder mystery kind of thing going on, which is much more my cup of tea, and I like the setup that he's found like in the marsh. It seems like he fell off a tower or was maybe pushed off a tower. They're trying to gather evidence if it's a murder or not, but there's not really evidence that he even got into the tower himself, let alone that someone like was in the tower with him and pushed him or whatever. And so that stuff's really interesting, but all those chapters are very short, and the majority has been with Kaya, and I'm just much more interested in the murder mystery stuff. What can you do? Some books are just not for you, and I think that Where the Crawdads Sing is just not for me. There's also a slight issue for me in that we've got some of like that southern like swamp talk, and some of the dialect is really hard for me to read because I'm not super familiar with that dialect. So A, I don't know what it really sounds like, and B, some of the words don't make sense to me in that dialect, and I don't know if they're just words I'm not familiar with because they're like a colloquial thing or what, but that's really frustrating. I mentioned it in my book club, and one of the members was really nice and sent me some videos of like mountain talk and swamp talk. That's not what they called them, but you know, that kind of thing, and helpful, but at the same time reading it again doesn't quite compute in my brain with dialects. And I could just listen to the audiobook, but I tried the audiobook a few months ago, and I didn't get very far in that either, and that was when I originally DNF'd this, so I was a little hesitant to pull this one up for book club anyways, but it's what we voted on, and here I am. I'm reading it very slowly. I'm just going to be behind the whole time probably at this point, but what can you do? Maybe it'll get better as it goes along and I'll actually catch up. We'll just have to see. But if you've read Where the Crawdads Sing, let me know what your thoughts are on it. Feel free to give me some spoilers if you think it'll help me be interested in what's going to happen next and get more interested in reading the story. But yeah, I think that's all I've got for now. This is the Uma Harper signing out.